The world held its breath as Ethan's hand brushed against Caleb's. A fleeting spark in the fading light of Havenwood's lake. In that single touch, a secret long-buried clawed its way to the surface, threatening to shatter the fragile peace of their small-town lives. Ethan's heart pounded, spent years hiding who he was. But tonight, under the watchful stars, he couldn't hide from Caleb's gaze. Havenwood, Ohio, was the kind of place where everyone knew your name and your business. A town of white picket fences and Sunday church bells. Ethan Harper, 24, with his sandy blonde hair and quiet demeanor, was the local mechanic. Hands stained with grease, but dreams filled with poetry he never shared. Caleb Thornton, 25, was the town's golden boy. A teacher with bright green eyes and a smile that disarmed even the sternest of Havenwood's elders. They'd grown up together, friends since childhood, their bond forged in treehouse promises and late-night confessions. But something deeper had always simmered beneath their laughter, something neither dared name until now. It was the summer of 2025, and Havenwood was buzzing with its annual Harvest Festival. The air smelled of caramel apples and bonfires, but tension crackled beneath the festivities. Ethan had overheard whispers at the garage, rumors about outsiders stirring trouble, about a new pastor preaching fire and brimstone against unnatural ways. He'd felt the weight of those words, each one a stone piling onto the wall he'd built around his truth. Caleb, too, carried a burden. His father, Pastor John Thornton, was the heart of Havenwood's church, a man whose love for his son was matched only by his unyielding beliefs. That evening, as the festival's lights twinkled, Ethan found Caleb by the lake, away from the crowd. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Caleb's eyes, usually so steady, flickered with something raw. "Every day," he admitted, stepping closer. Their hands met, and in that moment, the world shrank to just them. No judgment, no fear, only the truth of their hearts. But Havenwood wasn't kind to truths that didn't fit its mold. As they lingered, a shadow moved in the trees, someone watching, someone who could unravel everything. Ethan pulled back, his pulse racing. "We can't," he said, but his voice cracked with longing. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Why not? Why do we keep pretending?" Their argument was cut short by the sound of footsteps. It was Sarah, Caleb's sister, her face pale. "Dad's looking for you," she told Caleb, her eyes darting to Ethan. He heard something. "You need to be careful." The warning hung heavy, a reminder of the stakes. Ethan's chest tightened. Ed had always known love would come at a cost, but was he ready to pay it? As the festival's music faded into the night, Ethan walked home alone, the memory of Caleb's touch burning in his mind. He passed the church, its steeple looming like a judge. Inside, he knew Pastor Thornton was preparing his next sermon, one that could name their love as sin. Ethan's poetry notebook, tucked under his arm, felt heavier than ever. He'd written lines about Caleb for years, words he'd never shared. Tonight, he wanted to scream them to the world. Back at his small apartment above the garage, Ethan sat at his desk, pen trembling. He wrote, "In your eyes, I see the home I've never known." But the words felt fragile against the reality of Havenwood. Could love survive in a place that demanded conformity? What would it cost them to try? Ethan didn't sleep that night, his mind racing with possibilities and fears. Caleb's face haunted him, a beacon in the storm that was coming. The next morning, Ethan found a note slipped under his door. In Caleb's neat handwriting, it read, "Meet me at the dock tonight. We need to talk." Ethan's heart leapt, but dread coiled in his gut. What did Caleb want to say? Was this the beginning of something brave, or the end of everything safe? As the sun dipped low, Ethan made his way to the lake, each step heavier than the last. Caleb was already there, his silhouette framed against the water. "I'm tired of hiding," Caleb said before Ethan could speak. "I want us to be real." Ethan's breath caught. Could they dare to be more than a secret? What would it mean to choose each other in a town that might turn against them? The lake reflected the dying light, and Ethan felt the weight of a choice that could change everything. He reached for Caleb's hand, their fingers locking together. In that moment, they were no longer just friends, they were a promise. A rebellion. A ballad just beginning. The air was thick with the scent of pine and unspoken truths as Ethan and Caleb stood on the dock. Hands clasped, hearts exposed. Havenwood's quiet beauty felt like a cruel contrast to the storm brewing inside them. Caleb's words, "I want us to be real," echoed in Ethan's mind. A challenge he wasn't sure he could meet. The next day, Havenwood buzzed with festival preparations. But Ethan's world had shifted. He worked at the garage, his hands steady on a wrench, but his thoughts spiraling. Caleb's confession had cracked something open, and Ethan couldn't unsee the hope in his eyes. Yet fear gnawed at him. What would it mean to love openly in a town where whispers became weapons? He thought of his mother, who'd left Havenwood years ago, tired of its small-minded ways. She'd told him, "Find your truth, Ethan, but know it comes with a fight." Was this his fight? Caleb, meanwhile, faced his own battle. At the school where he taught history, students adored his passion, but his father's shadow loomed large. Pastor Thornton had called a special church meeting, and Caleb knew why. The rumors had spread someone had seen them by the lake. Caleb's sister, Sarah, pulled him aside at lunch. "Dad's talking about protecting the town's values," she said, her voice low. "He's worried about you." Caleb's stomach churned. He loved his father, but the man's beliefs felt like chains. That afternoon, Ethan and Caleb met at the town library, a quiet refuge. Sitting in a corner, surrounded by dusty books, they spoke in hushed tones. "I can't keep lying," Caleb said, his green eyes fierce. "I want to tell my dad. I want to tell everyone." Ethan's heart raced. "And then what?" "They'll tear us apart." Caleb leaned closer, his voice soft but firm. "Maybe, but I'd rather fight for us than live a lie." Their conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Hawthorne, the librarian, her eyes narrowing. "You boys keeping out of trouble?" she asked, her tone sharp. Ethan forced a smile, but the weight of her gaze lingered. Havenwood was watching, always watching. As they left, Caleb slipped a folded paper into Ethan's hand, a poem. Written in Caleb's hand, "Your heart is my horizon, vast and unafraid." Ethan's throat tightened. How could something so beautiful feel so dangerous? That night, Ethan attended the church meeting, his first in years. He sat in the back, his cap pulled low, watching Pastor Thornton at the pulpit. The pastor's voice boomed, warning of sins that threaten our community. Ethan's chest ached as Caleb, sitting near the front, kept his eyes down. The sermon wasn't just words, it was a line drawn in the sand. Afterward, Caleb caught Ethan outside. "He doesn't know it's us," Caleb whispered. "Not yet." But Ethan saw the fear in his eyes, mirrored by his own. The next day, Ethan found solace in his poetry, scribbling lines in his notebook. "We are stars in a sky that fears our light." He wanted to believe they could shine, but doubt crept in. At the garage, his boss, Mr. Carter, made a passing comment about those types ruining the town. Ethan's hands shook as he tightened a bolt. Was this what their future held? Judgment at every turn. Caleb, meanwhile, faced a confrontation. His father called him to the church office, his face stern. "People are talking, Caleb, about you and that Harper boy." Caleb's heart pounded, but he held his ground. "What if I care about him?" he asked, his voice steady. Pastor Thornton's eyes widened, then softened with pain. "You're my son. I want you to choose the right path." Caleb left, his father's words ringing in his ears. Right for who? That evening, they met again at the lake, the dock, their sanctuary. Caleb's voice was raw. "He thinks he can save me." But I don't need saving. Ethan took his hand, the gesture bolder now. Then what do we do? Caleb's answer was a kiss. Soft and urgent. Their first. The world fell away. But only for a moment. Footsteps crunched nearby. And they pulled apart. Hearts racing. It was just a deer. But the fear lingered. As they walked back to town, hand in hand under the cover of darkness, Ethan felt a spark of courage. Maybe they could be more than a secret. But as they passed the church, a flyer on the bulletin board caught Ethan's eye, a call for a community stand against moral decay. The date was tomorrow. Ethan's grip on Caleb's hand tightened. What would it take to stand together in a town determined to keep them apart? The morning of the community stand dawned cold. Havenwood's streets lined with posters preaching unity but reeking of division. Ethan woke with Caleb's kiss still burning on his lips. A memory that felt like both a lifeline and a fuse. Could they hold on to this fragile love when the town seemed ready to ignite? At the garage, Ethan worked in silence, his mind replaying the flyer's words, protect our values. He wondered who our included and who it left out. His coworker, Jake, a burly man with a quick laugh, noticed his distraction. You okay? Harper, you look like you're carrying the world. Ethan forced a nod, but Jake's eyes lingered. Curious, Ethan wondered how many others were watching, piecing together the truth. Caleb, meanwhile, faced his own reckoning. At school, a colleague mentioned the community stand, her tone casual but pointed. Your dad's doing good work. Caleb, keeping Havenwood pure. Caleb's smile was tight. He loved teaching, loved his students, but the weight of his father's crusade pressed harder each day. During lunch, he found a note in his desk, be careful who you trust. No signature, but the warning chilled him. Was it a threat or a plea? That afternoon, Ethan and Caleb stole a moment at the town's old mill, its rusted wheel creaking in the wind. I'm scared, Ethan admitted, his voice barely audible over the river's rush. Caleb's hand found his, steady and warm. Me too. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. Ethan's heart swelled, but doubt lingered. What would love cost them in a place like this? The community stand was held in the town square, a sea of familiar faces under a gray sky. Pastor Thornton stood on a makeshift stage, his voice fervent. We must protect our children, our faith, our way of life. The crowd cheered, but Ethan, standing at the edge, felt like an outsider in his own home. Caleb was there, too, his face unreadable. Their eyes met, a silent vow amidst the noise. Then it happened. A man in the crowd, Tom Reynolds, a local shopkeeper, pointed at Caleb. What about your son, Pastor? Folks saw him with that Harper boy. The crowd hushed, and Ethan's blood ran cold. Pastor Thornton's face paled, but he recovered quickly. My son is misguided, but he'll find his way. Caleb stepped forward, his voice shaking but clear. I'm not misguided. I love him. The square erupted gasps, shouts, whispers. Ethan's legs felt weak, but he moved to Caleb's side, their hands finding each other. Pastor Thornton's eyes locked on them, a mix of anger and anguish. This isn't the place, he said, but Caleb shook his head. It's the only place. The crowd parted as they walked away, hand in hand, the weight of every stare pressing down. That night, Ethan's apartment became their refuge. They sat on the floor, backs against the couch, sharing quiet truths. Caleb spoke of his mother, who died when he was young, and how her kindness had shaped him. Ethan shared his poetry, reading aloud, We are rivers, carving paths through stone. Their laughter mingled with tears, a fragile hope taking root. But Havenwood wasn't done with them. The next morning, Ethan found his garage vandalized, red paint spelling out sin across the door. Caleb's classroom wasn't spared. His desk was scrawled with slurs. Sarah came to Ethan, her face tear-streaked. Dad's talking about sending Caleb away. To some camp. Ethan's heart stopped. Conversion therapy. He'd heard the stories. The pain it inflicted. We won't let that happen, he said, his voice fierce. They met at the dock again. The lake a mirror to their turmoil. We could leave, Caleb said, his voice breaking. Start over somewhere else. Ethan hesitated. Havenwood was home. Flawed as it was. Could they run? Or should they fight? As the stars emerged, Ethan made a choice. We stay. We show them love isn't something to fear. Caleb nodded, his eyes shining. Together. Together, Ethan promised, their hands locking tight. But as they embraced, a car's headlights flashed in the distance, a reminder that their fight was far from over. What would it take to carve a place for their love in a town determined to erase it? The headlights faded, but the dread lingered as Ethan and Caleb stood on the dock, their hands still clasped. Havenwood's judgment felt like a tightening noose. Yet their love burned brighter, a defiance against the darkness. Ethan wondered, could they bend a town's heart? Or would it break them first? The next day, the vandalism made headlines in Havenwood's small newspaper. Local businesses targeted in hateful acts. The article read, but it didn't name Ethan or Caleb. Still, the town buzzed with gossip. At the garage, customers avoided Ethan's eyes, their silence louder than words. Jake, his co-worker, offered a gruff, "I'm sorry, man," but even that felt fragile. Ethan's poetry notebook became his anchor, each line a rebellion. Our love is a fire no storm can drown. Caleb faced worse. At school, parents demanded his suspension, calling his lifestyle a danger to students. The principal, a kind but spineless man, asked Caleb to take a leave. Just until things calmed down, he said. Caleb's jaw clenched. I'm a teacher, not a criminal. He walked out, head high, but inside, he was unraveling. His father's silence hurt most. Pastor Thornton hadn't spoken to him since the community stand. Sarah became their ally, slipping Ethan updates about their father's plans. He's meeting with some group from out of town, she whispered at the diner. They're pushing for that camp. Ethan's stomach twisted. He'd read about those place scold rooms. Cruel words. Hearts broken under the guise of salvation. He found Caleb at the library, his face pale. I won't go, Caleb said, his voice fierce. But I don't know how to stop him. They hatched a plan not to run, but to fight. Ethan suggested a public letter, a statement of their truth. Caleb hesitated. It'll make things worse. Ethan took his hand. Maybe, but it'll also make us free. They spent the night at Ethan's apartment, drafting the letter on his old laptop. We are Ethan and Caleb, and we love each other. It began. Our love doesn't hurt anyone. It's Havenwood's fear that does. They posted it online, anonymous for now, but the words felt like a spark in dry grass. The letter spread, shared by a few brave souls. Some in Havenwood called it brave. Others called it blasphemy. At the diner, Ethan overheard Mrs. Hawthorne defending them, her voice sharp. Those boys deserve to live. It was a small victory, but it gave Ethan hope. Caleb, though, was haunted by his father's silence. He's my dad, he told Ethan, tears in his eyes. How can he choose hate over me? The answer came sooner than expected. Pastor Thornton called a town meeting, his face grim on the church steps. We cannot let sin divide us, he said, holding up a printed copy of their letter. I know my son is involved. I ask you to pray for him. Caleb, in the crowd, stepped forward. I don't need prayers. Dad, I need you to see me. The silence was deafening. Pastor Thornton's eyes glistened, but he turned away. That night, Ethan and Caleb found refuge at the mill, the river's rush drowning out their fears. He's lost to me, Caleb said, his voice hollow. Ethan held him, their breaths sinking. You're not alone, Ethan whispered. You have me. They kissed, fierce and desperate, a promise against the world. But as they left, a group of men waited, Tom Reynolds among them, his face twisted with anger. "You're not welcome here," he spat. Ethan stepped in front of Caleb, heart pounding. "We're not going anywhere." The men hesitated, then dispersed, but their threat lingered. Back at Ethan's, they found another note: "Leave, or it gets worse." Caleb's hands shook, but he met Ethan's eyes. "We can't let them win." Ethan nodded, his poetry fueling his resolve. "We are roots, breaking stone apart." The next day, they decided to go public. At the festival's closing ceremony, with the town gathered, Caleb took the stage, Ethan at his side. "We wrote the letter," Caleb said, his voice clear. "We love each other, and we're not ashamed." The crowd was a mix of shock, support, and anger. Sarah clapped first, then Mrs. Hawthorne, then a few students. It wasn't a wave, but it was a start. Pastor Thornton stood at the back, his face unreadable. What would it take for him to see his son? For Havenwood to see them both? The festival's lights dimmed, but Ethan and Caleb's stand lit a fire in Havenwood. Their public declaration was a stone dropped in still water, ripples spreading through the town's heart. Could love, so fiercely claimed, change a place built on tradition? The days that followed were a storm. Some in Havenwood rallied behind them. Sarah organized a small support group, and Mrs. Hawthorne started a book club discussing acceptance. But others doubled down. Tom Reynolds and his allies posted flyers calling for a boycott of Ethan's garage. Caleb's teaching job hung by a thread, the school board debating his fate. Yet Ethan felt a shift inside himself. For the first time, he wasn't hiding. His poetry notebook overflowed. "We are wings, rising where others fall." Caleb, though, struggled. His father's silence cut deeper each day. One evening, he went to the church, finding Pastor Thornton alone at the altar. "Dad," Caleb said, voice breaking, "I'm still your son." The pastor's hands trembled, but he spoke softly. "I love you, Caleb, but I can't condone this." Caleb left, tears streaming, but a weight lifted faced his father, and he was still whole. Ethan and Caleb leaned on each other, their love a fortress. They spent nights at the dock, planning a future beyond Havenwood's judgment. "We could move to Columbus," Ethan suggested, imagining a city where they could walk hand in hand. Caleb smiled, but his eyes held Havenwood's pull. "I want to stay, to show them we're not a threat." Ethan nodded, his heart swelling. They'd fight for their home. The school board's decision came a week later. Caleb was fired. The news hit like a punch, but he refused to break. With Sarah's help, he started tutoring kids at the library, his passion undimmed. Ethan's garage saw fewer customers, but those who came, Mrs. Hawthorne, Jake, a few others, brought loyalty that meant more than money. Slowly, Havenwood was splitting, not just against them, but for them. The turning point came unexpectedly. At a town council meeting, Sarah presented a petition for an inclusivity ordinance, signed by dozens, including students Caleb had taught. Ethan spoke, his voice steady. "We're not asking for special treatment, just the right to love." The room was tense, but a few nodded. Pastor Thornton was there, silent but listening. When a council member moved to table the vote, Mrs. Hawthorne stood. "These boys are Havenwood. Denying them denies us all." The vote passed, narrowly, a small step, but a victory. That night, Ethan and Caleb returned to the lake, the dock their constant. "We did it," Caleb whispered, his hand in Ethan's. "Not yet," Ethan said, smiling, "but we're getting there." They kissed under the stars, their love no longer a secret but a beacon. Pastor Thornton appeared, his face weary. "I don't understand," he said, "but I'm trying." It wasn't acceptance, but it was a crack in the wall. Caleb hugged his father, tears falling. Months later, Havenwood wasn't transformed, but it was softer. Ethan's garage thrived with loyal customers. Caleb started a community education program, teaching history and hope. They bought a small house by the lake, their dock now a symbol of their journey. Ethan's poetry became a book, shared at the library. Lines like, "Our hearts harmonized," a ballad for the brave. Their love hadn't conquered all, but it had carved a space where none existed. Havenwood was learning, slowly, that love wasn't a threat, but a gift. As Ethan and Caleb stood on their dock, hands entwined, they knew the fight wasn't over. But they also knew they'd face it together. Their hearts harmonized in a ballad that would echo beyond their small town, a testament to love's power to heal and endure.